Hey guys, we are Longhorn Consulting Group. On this team is me, Sarah Lee, Hannah, PJ, Nusa, and Jeffrey. So today we'll be going over Amazon and their company background, the problem statement analysis, and the recommendations that Longhorn Consulting Group has come up with. So for an introduction, in 1995, Amazon was launched as an online bookstore by Jeff Bezos, but obviously this isn't the Amazon we know today. The business expanded to selling computer games and music in 1998, but the most pivotal time for Amazon was in the mid-2000s with the launch of Amazon Web Services. The strategy helped Amazon fuel innovation and efficiency of their Prime services and cloud computing. Today, Amazon tops a market cap of $1.592 trillion, joining the FANG stocks, which are the 5 largest tech companies by market cap. The companies that are included on this list are Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, and Google. As an e-commerce and cloud computing giant, the company contributed $315 billion to the US GDP since 2010. And so with the successes of Amazon, there are many shortcomings. And the main problem that Longhorn Consulting Group has found is their organizational culture and how there is a hyper focus on productivity. And so this is the type of culture that's led to union issues and mental health issues, unfavorable working conditions, and high employee turnover rates. Employees are now filing reports for unsafe working conditions, and it's now up to Amazon executives to reverse the damage.
Next, we'll talk about our data collection methods. So for our data collection, we aim to get 2 types of sources: primary sources and secondary sources. So for our primary sources, we have tweets from Amazon News themselves, which is directly affiliated with Amazon. We have union speeches from Amazon factory workers, and we have the 2020 Amazon annual report. And for our secondary sources, we have websites, worker polls, and worker testimonies, which were given through interviews conducted by third parties that was found on these websites. So the problem diagnosis. So when you think about Amazon, it's important to think about their level of productivity. And an example of this would be Amazon Prime, in which customers get free next day delivery. And this is really important because in order to get those next day deliveries, real work has to be done. And this is why there's such a customer obsession with delivering the results. And because of this productivity culture, we have unsafe working conditions, which include injuries, low motivation, burnout, and just mental health crises. And the Amazon managers' lack of empathy doesn't make it any better because they tend to blatantly ignore the issues, dismiss employee concerns, and even just not acknowledge them at all, and not being transparent with them does not help as well. And lastly, this leads to high turnover rates, and this is double than the average retail and warehousing industry rates, and it is the highest in tech.
So looking at Amazon warehouses through the 3 levels of culture framework, if you were to be in a warehouse, the first thing you'd probably notice are these Kiva robots, which are moving around, and their job is to bring shelves of products to pickers, and pickers' jobs, which are manned by humans, are to pick the correct item, box it up, and later ship it out to the customer. There are minimal distractions in the warehouse. There's really not much going on besides conveyor belts, these Kiva robots, massive stacks of product shelves, and these stationary pickers who do their job. And the pickers are supposed to do their job as fast as possible. They're expected to do it on average of 7 seconds, which is a pretty high goal for them. The norms and values that Amazon says that these artifacts represent is that efficiency is key for customer satisfaction. And this is consistent with Amazon's belief of customer obsession. By being as efficient as you can in the warehouse, then you're able to ship out your products as quick as possible and your customers will be satisfied. And the underlying assumptions that these represent, it really shows that for Amazon, the value of the customer is infinitely greater than that of the employee. For Amazon, the employee is just a means to an end, which is to satisfy the customer. Looking at Amazon workers using the 2-factor motivation hygiene theory, we sort of see how motivation is low among the employees of a warehouse in Amazon, with the hygiene factors, which, if you remember, are designed to lower job dissatisfaction, are relatively low. Working conditions are poor. Job security is almost zero, right? If a picker isn't fast enough compared to their coworkers, they can be fired. Admittedly, the salary is better than average, and this seems to be the only reason why a lot of warehouse workers stay, but even then, that's not enough to increase motivation. Moving on to the motivation factors, which are designed to increase job satisfaction, these are also relatively low. Job advancement is rare. The only way to do so in a warehouse environment is to be more efficient than your coworkers. If you're average, there really is no opportunity for advancement. The work itself, as you can imagine, is low task variety, doing the same thing over and over for hours on end, and employees have little to no autonomy in their work. They just do as they're told.
Next, let's talk about Amazon's constant surveillance culture. So disciplinary write-ups or have the potential to get you fired, and they're usually given if too many minutes are spent away. So this usually means no talking, no bathroom breaks, no mistakes, and there are performance improvement plans for the bottom 5% of employees who produce the least. Directing instead of empowering is another consequence of this constant surveillance culture. And basically, this constant surveillance really puts the employees on edge, and this further contributes to mental strain and pressure they have to succeed. Now, let's talk about warehouse conditions. So as you all may know, a lot of factory workers and Amazon workers have actually been voicing their concerns about their conditions in the warehouse and factories. And one of their main concerns is the lack of breaks. So there are about two 50-minute breaks for a 10-hour shift. And as you can imagine, this leads to mental strain. And the injury rate is 3 times the national average. And it's, of course, higher during holidays and Prime Week. And the craziest thing about this all is that it is still underreported. Now, let's continue about the toll on the mental and physical health. So since about 2018, there's been about 189 emergency responses, and this includes reports of suicide attempts, suicidal thoughts, mental health crises, breakdowns, and just a no work-life balance. And unfortunately, one worker in Nevada actually committed suicide at an Amazon facility, and another Amazon worker actually had a heart attack, and it took Amazon about 20 minutes for them to get help for this man. And there's also a 7.7% serious injury rate. This is underreported, but yet almost the double industry average. And this has resulted in people having to take personal time off. Now, let's dive into Amazon's response to the Bessemer unionization. So Bessemer, Alabama is the location of an Amazon warehouse, and a lot of factory workers were aiming to unionize at this warehouse. And Amazon actively tried to dissuade employees from unionizing. And one of the ways they did this was through mandatory union education meetings. And in these meetings, they basically tried to get the workers to vote against the union. And they also had anti-union text messages and posters that were hung up everywhere. And it was very intimidating to vote for the union because Amazon has a history of firing pro-union people, and they are constantly monitoring the votes, so nothing's really anonymous. And many who were eligible to vote had already left due to Amazon's culture, and they just didn't want to be there anymore. And the retail and wholesale department union filed 23 objections with the National Labor Relations Bureau, alleging Amazon interfered illegally. And Amazon committed to improve within the next 100 days, but as we know about a successful negotiation, this requires both parties to be satisfied, and as of now, only one party is. So unfortunately, the Amazon unionization vote lost, and they voted against unionizing.
So on this slide is Amazon News's response to a politician, basically calling them out on their wages and workers peeing in a bottle. And so their response basically was gaslighting the politician. And so on the right, they had to save face and come up with an excuse and a response to their original response to the politician. So warehouse worker attrition rate is about 89 to 107%. And it comes down to Amazon treating employees as expendable and disposable. This is now affecting the tech industry by setting the precedent with the attraction, selection, attrition model. considering Amazon's high number of applicants and extensive interview process, they seem to be able to be following the attraction and selection components of the model as they're selecting the right people for the job. However, their churn rate still remains very high. Not only is Amazon supporting an toxic culture, but they are spreading it as the standard for the industry. And now it's up to Amazon to switch the standard.
All right, so our first recommendation for Amazon is increasing the length of their breaks. Warehouse employees have said that their current breaks are too short, as it takes 10 minutes alone to walk across the warehouse and access their belongings. Additionally, when warehouse employees are forced to work long periods of time without a sufficient break, they get tired, they lose focus, and they are put at a greater risk of getting injuries. So in order to combat this, we recommend that Amazon add 15 minutes to their current break and consolidate their existing breaks so that employees have more time to themselves. And then for employees who are working for over 6 hours, we recommend that they implement a 90-minute break in the middle of their shift. Implementing these changes would be healthier for their employees, and it would cause more individual productivity. But Amazon's ability to make same-day deliveries would potentially be put at harm if we were to implement this. So that would be a potential downfall of this. Our next recommendation for Amazon is increasing their minimum wage to $24 an hour. We landed on this amount because this is what minimum wage would be in America had it increased with inflation. And by implementing this change early, Amazon will come out ahead of the curve as opposed to other companies, and this amount would serve as a greater incentive for employees. The downside of doing this, though, would be an additional cost to Amazon annually. In addition to increasing minimum wage, Amazon must improve their working conditions and create a safe working environment for their employees. The biggest motivator for employees is their well-being and their peace of mind while they're at the workplace. So naturally, Amazon must adhere to these higher standards. Amazon executives need to regularly speak with their warehouse employees, whether this be through a survey or having someone come in and conduct interviews, in order to find out what their employees need and how they can provide these needs for them. Essentially, Amazon executives must add their employees' concerns to their highest list of priorities. Now to make sure that these changes are long-term, we recommend that Amazon changes organizational structure. Amazon is a hierarchical organization that takes no input from blue-collar workers. This has caused Amazon to overvalue the convenience of its customers and force its employees into stringent, high productivity work culture that they currently operate in. We see reducing the power distance between warehouse employees and corporate higher-ups as one of the ways to best improve the workload, because it would give warehouse employees greater control. By giving warehouse employees a seat at the executive table, they can collaborate with other executives in order to create a more sustainable goal and improve working conditions. An unintended consequence of doing this, though, is lack of consensus. The goals of corporate Amazon and the interests of Amazon warehouse employees directly conflict with one another. So having these two parties continuously in the same room may lead to polarized views for how Amazon should operate. And if they decide not to take this recommendation, we suggest that they try distributive negotiations. Amazon skews very far from what warehouse employees need, such as no unionizing, unsafe working conditions, or lack of motivation. So it would be beneficial for Amazon to renegotiate with their warehouse employees in order to improve their well-being. For example, Amazon may vehemently refuse to allow their employees to unionize, while warehouse employees will dig their heels in for increased breaks and higher pay. As things stand right now, the aspiration range for Amazon's employers or the executives is much higher than that of the workers. But Amazon executives should strive to meet their employees somewhere in the middle. After this is done and the terms are set, company executives can rework the goals of Amazon around what was negotiated.
Now for the conclusion. So as you mentioned before, there's three main problems that surround Amazon, including their productivity culture, which has to do with customer obsession and their eagerness to create profit. Number two, the unsafe working conditions and the lack of breaks is also a very pertinent problem within the whole organization. And number three, a lack of empathy on behalf of the managers and higher ups about these issues. And our recommendations include increasing breaks, increasing the minimum wage, creating a better working environment, and restructuring the organization with using distributive negotiation.